What's with all these badass women in movies and TV who still need to be rescued by men? Or the ones who can defeat armies of muscle-bound henchmen bare-handed, but have to do it in skin-tight suits and high heels? And what's up with those badass women who never wanted or needed a man until our suave hero sexed her up, and then she dies? Welcome to the Outrider Podcast's 7-part series, Problematic Badass Female Tropes. I'm your host, Jason Quinn Malott, and I'll be talking with the writer, performer, and all-around badass who identified these tropes, my friend Jenn Zuko. So strap on some pasties and a merkin, and let's do this thing. Welcome to the Outrider Podcast's 7-part series, Problematic Badass Female Tropes. I'm your host, Jason Quinn Malott, and I'll be talking with the writer, performer, and all-around badass who identified these tropes, my friend Jenn Zuko. So strap on some pasties and a merkin, and let's do this thing. Here we are, episode number 5 of Problematic Badass Female Tropes. This one is Mother Knows Best. Should I recap for the audience?
I was actually going to read a paragraph from my article for this one, just because this one's kind of more of a, I don't know that it's difficult, but kind of the center of it to me is sort of hinging on the comparing of the female badasses with the male counterpart badasses. Can I do that?
Sure. We will do whatever you like.
It's a short paragraph.
Okay.
So this is the one that I wanted to sort of nail as the center of the sort of argument of this trope. So
correct.
It's towards the end of the article. How does this trope do its damage? By propagating through strong female characters, strong in quotes, the tired stereotype that women must all be nurturers, also that men are not. That no matter how powerful a woman may be in the world, her role as a woman will always be at home with the children. So then if you want to do a recap after that.
Well, certainly. Well, the basic premise of the trope is, she can be the baddest badass in the galaxy, conquer aliens, but in the end, it's all just for, it's all so that she can go back to raising the kids and making the sandwiches.
Yeah, exactly. Yep, that's right.
She doesn't,
and that's her only, especially if it's a certain type of uber bloody kind of action hero type character. I think I brought up Beatrix Kiddo from the Kill Bill movies, and also brought up Katniss Everdeen from the books and movies both. It's that's the only choice for redemption that a character like that actually has, is to end up as a mother. Whereas the male characters don't. They have all kinds of stuff, and they normally don't end up as a family man.
They certainly
even
don't
if they
end
do,
up as a mother.
No, well, yeah, exactly. But you know what I mean.
End up as a motherfucker.
There's a lot. There are several more options for a badass male character, but there's only one choice of redemption and choice of conclusion for a badass female character, and that's in being a mother.
Right. And right at the gate, because I've been thinking about this all day. A good.
My blushes, sir.
Well, the best kind of counter argument to this trope is Ant-Man and the Wasp.
Oh, I haven't
and Ant-Man and the Wasp also kind of argues against, I think, at least one of the other tropes. Because
is it a good example?
Oh, it's a good one, right? Because
nice. Okay,
because of course Ant-Man. So Ant-Man and the Wasp. We talked about how. This Ant-Man and the Wasp kind of goes, it does a good version of Mother Knows Best. Well, it flips the version of Mother. It flips Mother Knows Best, and also challenges or subverts the story of his life trope. Right.
Oh, cool.
Because.
I'm so glad. I'm really wanting, I'm hoping that your listeners will comment on these a lot too, because I'm expanding all of these into one book. I want to have examples in all kinds of entertainment and literature of stories that don't do these. I want some examples of the anti-tropes, I guess.
Right.
That would be great to have. So, okay, Ant-Man and the Wasp. Good.
So
okay.
Ant-Man and the Wasp. Right. So,
Sweet.
Ant-Man, of course, being the title character, he's the hero, right? But his whole thing is, he wants to be a good father to his daughter. And he's very focused on the kid. It's his kid he's worried about. At the start of the movie, you haven't seen it yet, so I'm going to try not to give too many spoilers. At the start,
I don't actually really care about spoilers. If I get a spoiler, I'm just more interested in seeing how the spoiler happens than getting all bent out of shape about it.
Okay. So kind of to explain why Ant-Man is not with the Avengers when they go after Thanos is that he's on house arrest.
Oh dear. Okay.
because of the airport fight in Germany during the Avengers the Civil War movie.
I haven't seen that one.
You haven't seen Civil War either?
I haven't seen a lot of them. I saw the first Thor movie. I saw Ragnarok. Mm-hmm. I saw the first Iron Man.
Okay. So, right. So Ant-Man got arrested after Civil War for leaving the country and violating the Sokovia Accords about, powered or special humans. Mm-hmm. And so he's on house arrest while the others are out doing the thing. But of course, Hank Pym and Hank's daughter, Hope, come and recruit him because there's a problem going on. And he's only like 3 days away from finishing his house arrest. And they keep dragging him out of the house and sneaking him out of the house and like putting his ankle monitor on an ant that will mimic his activities in the house so that the FBI doesn't think he's left. Right. And everything. He just wants to get done with the house arrest so he can spend time with his daughter out in the world rather than having her always come to the house to see him. Mm-hmm. Right. And that's the most. And of course, Ant-Man, because it's Paul Rudd and because it's Marvel, Ant-Man is also kind of the comedic foil for the whole thing.
Yeah.
He was a thief that got recruited into being this superhero. And so he's, kind of awkward and goofy or whatever. And Hope Van Dyne, which is Hank Pym's daughter, is the Wasp, and she's a badass. She kicks ass. She's got the full Wasp suit. It's not done up to be, like not part of her body is showing that shouldn't be showing, right? It's just the full suit. And actually, she has wings and blasters, which Ant-Man doesn't have. So she's even got a cooler suit than Ant-Man. And she can shrink and all this other stuff like that. And she's a total badass, right?
Oh, neat. Okay.
And, she does not fall away. She doesn't need to be, she does not need to be rescued by Ant-Man any more frequently than Ant-Man needs to be rescued by her.
So it's kind of so it's more,
true
dare I say, realistic.
It's a true team effort between the two of them. Right.
Oh, that's cool.
To get to the end of this movie. And of course, at the end of the movie, it's not, she doesn't lose all of her powers and become a mother or something like that. And Ant-Man doesn't ride off into the sunset, the lone hero or whatever.
Right.
The whole movie ends with the three of them making a neat little family. But that's not, of course, the real end because, all the Marvel movies have the slug at the end.
Oh, right. Yes, of course.
Right. So I won't tell you that one, but it plays into the whole Thanos timeline, whatever. So... And it ties up nicely and explains, why Ant-Man's going to be around for the second half of the, the two-part conclusion to the first wave of these movies.
Right. Is it only going to be 2 movies? Do you know?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then, of course, the second wave, will be centered around Captain Marvel and some of the other heroes that are left over, people that still want to do it, as opposed to the guy that's been Chris. What's his name? One of the 3 Chris's.
Yeah, no, they're all Chris, aren't they?
who's been playing Captain America, and of course, Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man. They're all getting ready. They've been doing these characters for 10 years now. They're ready to do something else.
Yeah, they're done.
And so it's moving on to other younger actors to focus around other Marvel characters. And I'm sure that, like in the comic books, other people will take on the mantle of being Iron Man or
sure,
Captain America and in future versions.
That's the nice thing about having them be comic book movies, because you can always do that. You could be like, which Green Lantern is it? Is it so-and-so or so-and-so?
Well, now that they've set up the MCU this way, I think that's going to happen more often rather than rebooting movies the way they were doing, prior to the first Iron Man and, constantly rebooting all this stuff. You're actually going to have, you'll just cycle people in and out like they do with the comic books, and occasionally you might bring the original guy back for something because the original guy always comes back for something.
Oh, sure.
Right.
That's true in the comics too.
But anyway, so yeah, Ant-Man and the Wasp totally is some good examples for how this doesn't work. Now. Oh,
cool. Well, that's good to know. Thank you.
Yes. So Mother Knows Best. Now, one thing about Mother's Knows Best, because you did mention you had Katniss Everdeen in there and Beatrix Kiddo from the Kill Bill stuff. Mm-hmm. And and they do and I've never seen all of the Hunger Games stuff.
I've read them. I saw the first movie, but I've read all the books. So.
Okay. I've never even read the books. I just saw some of the movies, so I don't know the story that well. But in these two examples that you give, I'm taking your word for it that these two characters,
Ripley too. That
these two characters, wander off into the kitchen, pop out some babies.
Well, it's the conclusion of those two are both very bloody sort of action type heroes. Mm-hmm. Beatrix Kiddo is sort of a slaughterer of many evil henchmen kind of a character.
Oh, I've seen that.
And Katniss Everdeen is a taker down of evil governments kind of character, and she ends up killing a lot of people too. So she's got super war PTSD. She's got I was a rebel warrior for a while PTSD. She's got lots of blood on her hands. And she ends up settling, spoiler alert, guys, she ends up settling down with the more gentle of her two sort of
paramours.
Like romance interests, yeah.
Yeah.
So she settles down with the gentler of the two and has babies as her sort of conclusion, as her denouement.
Right.
But like I say in the article, it's like, well, that's not necessarily a bad. I mean, for poor Katniss, that might be a really nice, happy ending for her.
Right.
The problem is with the trope is that it happens so many times. It happens so often, and only for the female badasses and never for the male badasses. I mean, you never hardly ever see a character like Lone Wolf and Cub, which would be that's like the only male version of Mother Knows Best I can think of. And actually, Lone Wolf and Cub still goes through all kinds of bloody adventures. He just happens to have his baby with him.
Right.
As he does it. It's just you don't get the conclusion. The only way of redeeming your bloody history is by having babies and staying with the babies. That's the important thing. Like you have the old Mad Max movies, and he certainly is all about protecting the kid during his one adventure, but then he leaves and he rides off into the sunset for more solo save the day kinds of adventure.
Right.
His story is told by the kid who grows up later without him. So the male counterparts tend to not have this sort of, or if they do, it's almost like a joke or like an albatross around their neck kind of thing. It's one of the male tropes. I'm running a new series of the male tropes, and that's one of the bad tropes about that is like, men can't be good parents.
That's where I think you can use Ant-Man as a counterbalance.
Oh, great. That's great.
So you'll need to watch the two Ant-Man movies.
I will. I'm going to have to do that. That's good to know. I always need more movies to watch, especially because my partner's going to get oral surgery soon. I'm going to spend a weekend
not have
him totally like zonked out on painkillers and not being able to do anything but watch movies. So
right on.
There we go.
So the one thing that did pop into my mind as I was reading this was that, although at the end of Aliens, Ripley, wanders off with the kid. If you take into the big arc of Ripley's character, she doesn't end up with the happily ever after, the baby and the whatever. Because in the next movie, the kid's taken from her and she dies. Spoiler. Yeah. Right. So
in that story though.
But in that one story, she's the total, as we would say post Sarah Palin, mama bear. Yeah, totally. Yeah. Except,
I actually had some when the article first came out, I had some comments were like, oh yeah, but Newt, the character, she's just connected to her because she realizes she's lost her own daughter who would be about that age And
I
so
thought
she
her
feels
daughter,
that.
I thought it was like 100 years before she was found.
No, but like the last time she saw her actual daughter.
Oh, right.
She would have been about Newt's age, and so she feels that loss into the night.
Right.
I'm like, well, yeah, but that doesn't change the fact that they're shoehorning her into this trope.
Right.
In other stories of Ripley's, she has other things that happen to her, but in that particular story, that is what happens to her.
But I think
there's all kinds of other shit that happens to Ripley, like there's like clones and shit, and there's the self-sacrificing thing that she does, and other so it's like there's a lot of stuff that goes on. So.
Right. Well, the thing I find interesting though is that I think if Aliens hadn't been made in that section of the 80s in which it was made, they probably would not have put the kid in it.
Oh, you think so?
Well, it was really
what makes you say that?
Well, there was a lot of. I seem to have this sense, and I would have to go back and double check on it, this sense that during that era, that middle 80s, there was a lot of, and maybe it would have been made with a kid recently, but there seemed to have always been that token, kid stuck in the movie. What
year was Aliens? Do we need to start IMDbing shit now?
No, let's fuck it.
Fuck research. I already did all the research when I wrote the articles.
I read the articles.
I was thinking like stuff like War Games and like Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, where he's got fucking short round around. Is that like the same sort of?
Yeah, and that's the same era where they always seem to wanted to stick a kid in there as a character that was, And then
we have the protagonist kids like Goonies and Babysitter's Club, and not Babysitter's Club,
but that's
Adventures in Babysitting.
Right, that was slightly different, because that was at least centering on the kids, whereas there seemed to have been a lot of,
but they're action movies though. Action adventure movies with kids.
Right, but the kids are the ones that are doing the main acting and adventuring.
That's true.
And they're not they're the ones, they save themselves and each other. Whereas,
I see. So it's not like a parenting, it's not like a mother thing.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, because, Temple of Doom, Indy was having to save Short Round and
the woman.
And the woman. Kate Capshaw,
because,
by the way.
Yes, Kate Capshaw. I have some major theories about why that character didn't work out so well, but that's a whole nother.
Kate Capshaw's character in that one?
Yeah. Why she's so irritating.
Oh, well.
Having seen it again, I have a whole, I have an actually awesome theory. And as a person who analyzes literature on a regular basis, I'm saying that I'm right. I think that it's true. It's that she's trying to be comic relief.
Right.
But there's already comic relief in a Short Round. So her being comic relief as well as Short Round being comic relief, it doesn't work. It just ends up being grating and irritating.
Yeah.
If she tried to do something else with that character, it would have worked way better. Right.
So
back to Mother Knows Best.
Because, really this one is probably the most solid of the tropes that we've seen so far. Or did I say that already about one of the other ones?
You said that last one.
Well, no. Last week was the one that I had the least amount of. I agreed with the most.
Oh.
But I think as far as examples, this one has the most fitting examples. So you got the Ripley, you got the Katniss.
Oh, I see.
And we can think of other badass women characters that end up, descending into the kitchen and the sandwich making.
End up being domesticated, or alternatively, as I mentioned briefly, ones who can't and so therefore are not allowed to be redeemed. Like I'm thinking Black Widow. Doesn't she have a few comments about not being able to have children and that kind of like?
Oh yeah.
Doesn't she call herself a monster because she can't have kids?
Right. But then again, she spends the whole show cleaning up after the boys. So she's mothering them.
Oh, I see. So she's mothering the male superheroes.
Right.
Okay. Well, but it is that sort of attitude, though, where it's like if you can't be a mother, or God forbid, choose not to be a mother, then you are some kind of you're some kind of like freak.
Right.
And you don't get your redemption as a woman then if you can't be a mother, or you don't end up being a mother.
Or at least you don't get your own standalone.
as your conclusion. Yeah, right. Yeah,
Right?
well, that's what I mean. Yeah.
You know?
Sure.
I mean, why doesn't Black Widow get her own standalone movie? I mean, come on.
Yeah, I don't know. There's a really interesting backstory there. We'd like to see that.
Why no?
Mm-hmm.
And who wouldn't want to see Scarlett Johansson actually do a movie where she's actually properly cast?
Right? Instead of cast as Asian characters.
Miscast as being a whitewashed Asian character.
Oh, God. That's a whole nother podcast
right.
as well.
Oh, whitewashing. That'd be a whole nother series of shows. So
whitewashing.
How then do we thwart? How then do we subvert specifically this trope?
Well, I say that it seems like there's more and more a plethora of badass action hero type female characters, and even more so sometimes, every once in a while, they end up being the protagonist. And if we do that, and when we do that, let's give them other options for their conclusion to their story, other than being domesticated. Can't a woman go riding off into the sunset? Let's give them other options besides having to go stay at home with the children. And it's not like that's a terrible way to end your life, but it's the only way women are allowed to end their life in movies like that and in stories like that. So let's give them other options for endings. Let's give them other endings. I actually was thinking about Atomic Blonde recently. I only saw it once in the theater, and I'm kind of trying to remember the ending to that. I think that she does end up sort of riding off into the sunset to do more adventures.
Potentially,
I think that's how that movie ends.
Yeah.
So stuff like that. If we could just give these female badass characters more types of conclusions besides being domesticated, that would be the way to subvert that trope. That way it won't be a trope. That way it might happen sometimes, but it won't be a trope anymore.
Right. But wouldn't the feminist argument be that, particularly if we take the Katniss Everdeen example that you gave here as the sticking point, as the arguing point, wouldn't the feminist argument be, well, we shouldn't, criticize or call it a trope or call it something or treat it this way if being domesticated is something that she chooses to do? Wouldn't that be robbing this woman of her empowerment to choose to be a sandwich maker?
Well, that's exactly what I'm saying. If it makes sense for the character, and it definitely does, fine. But it doesn't make sense for every single one of these female characters. Right. Let's give these characters the options for endings that are more apt for their particular characters. Maybe for Katniss that is the right ending. In fact, it doesn't seem that Katniss's ending doesn't actually bother me so much. Although I would be like, wouldn't she be involved in this government that she just helps to overthrow? She probably wouldn't. I mean, whatever. But why
couldn't she both be a mother and still be a politician?
Exactly.
Right. I mean,
exactly.
That's one of the great things about our current Congress. We have more mothers of young children in Congress now than we've ever had before.
Oh, it's great.
What the fuck?
Yeah, and there's all kinds of cool shit going on because of it.
Yep.
So that's what I would say to those feminists. I'd be like, that's all fine. That's great. But right now, this is the only option that we're seeing for these types of characters. So let's just make it appropriate for the character.
Right.
Let's say, okay, Beatrix Kiddo saved her daughter. She's not going to stay home with her daughter. Not that character. She's going to maybe be a lone wolf and cub now. Can that happen, please, for a female? Let's give more options to female characters. The same types of wide options that we have for male characters.
Considering her motivation for going on the quest that she goes on, what then would be her motivation to continue to be a badass?
I don't know. We'd have to just see.
I mean, would it make sense? So
maybe it wouldn't for that character. Maybe she would just decide to give up all the bloodiness, or maybe the badassness would come to her. Maybe all the people who she slaughtered would come, their families would come to enact revenge on her, and she'd have to, and they'd come to her.
So she has to continue to be a badass to protect herself and her child.
Sure. Yeah. Right. Something like that, but just having some other option open available.
Right. So at what point, because this brings up something that I've kind of that doesn't really have anything to do with the trope, that doesn't have anything to do with gender, but has to do with the structure, the plotting, the predictability, the formula of story in general, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so...
Well, this is where tropes start to happen, is when it's too predictable or too stereotypical.
Why does a badass even have to stay a badass?
They don't have to.
Right?
They don't have to.
And it's almost kind of predictable that within the world of the story that's created by these hyper-violent stories, like the Kill Bills and stuff like this, is that you have a character who... Basically what I'm getting at is, you have a character who has very simplistic motivations when you take them, when you expand the context beyond the story.
Mm-hmm.
If you extend, this is probably why I have a problem with with not all, but a lot of genre fiction, is that you take that context, and this probably also applies to mystery fiction more. This applies more to genre fiction that's set in a real world in a simulacrum of real world stuff, as opposed to fantasy or sci-fi or stuff like that.
Okay.
Right? Is that you have this situation, this character who's doing a certain thing, and they have rather simplistic motivations for doing the thing. Kill Bill being an example of it. It's set in it seems like it's set in a contemporary environment, and she becomes this badass because she's been wronged, because she wants her daughter back, and she does that for one simple reason. But within you expand that out into the greater context of the real world. Would anything that happens after that be unexpected? Okay,
so this reminds me of my formula for story that I teach everybody.
Uh-huh.
And it has to do with the 3 rules for actors. What do I want? What do I do to get what I want? What stands in my way?
Right.
So a character, the whole thing that a story even is a protagonist, a character wants something.
Right.
With all her heart and soul. She will die if she does not have it. So she goes out and gets it. She has obstacles that stand in her way. She does different tactics to get the obstacle. When she achieves her obstacle or sees that her obstacle is not achievable, then the story is over.
Right.
The next time the next story happens, if there happens to be a sequel, there is a new objective.
Mm-hmm.
So that's all a story is. It is character wants something. Character goes to get something. Character achieves it.
Right.
That's when the story is over. I think something that you're saying is already the problem, which is not only in genre fiction. In fact, it's everywhere. And that's, you use the word simplistic. I think that's really where the core of the problem lies, is the character's objective is simplistic, or is you don't see the stakes involved in what this character wants.
Right.
That's where the problem lies in what you're saying. So in stories like that, where you're like, well, what the fuck? That just means, because you use the word simplistic, and that's exactly right there. You just pinpointed the problem. That character has an objective, and that author, whoever wrote the story, did not give that character an important enough objective, did not put the stakes high enough for that character to obtain that objective. And so what that story reads like then is just, well, why do I even care if this character gets this objective? Like, why do they want this objective so much? Like, why am I even following them?
Right.
I don't really, so that's really what I would reply with. Is that an answer? Is that a rich enough answer? I think you just nailed it with your use of language right there. Simplistic objective.
That would imply that there are other tropes at work in particularly the Kill Bill movies that have not been trope, also being a synonymous with shortcut, right?
Shortcut or stereotype.
So there are other shortcuts and stereotypes in Kill Bill that have not been adequately addressed. Otherwise,
I do mention it. I think I mentioned it in the Down the Rabbit Hole one, right? The torturing women one.
Right. But I'm talking also about tropes and stereotypes relating to the bad guys, to the instigating.
Oh, sure. Mm-hmm.
thing.
And the plot structure, and yeah.
Because she goes after her kid. Why? Because it's her kid? Because it was taken from her?
What's the stakes? Is her kid in danger?
Wasn't she pregnant and the kid was taken out of her, and so she's never really known the kid, right? Isn't that
right? Yeah.
Am I understanding that right?
There's actually I don't know. I don't remember.
I mean, I don't think the kid was born at the time, was it? She was a bride, or maybe the kid was. I don't remember. It's been, like I said.
I think the kid was born, but I don't think she knew her very much. And then there's the other thing too. Like there's been people online who have been talking about these movies a lot, and one of them is like, this child. So she ends up killing Bill,
right?
And she ends up taking her kid, but like this kid's only known him as a parent, like
right.
Sure, this is a horrible kidnapping story or whatever, probably, but like, how is that a happy ending?
How's that a happy ending for the kid?
Just because she has her daughter again, like what? It's not really like, what is that? So she just has to be domesticated because she's a female, or like,
right?
Like what? And so now she has to be with her mother because she's her mother. So there's been a lot of questions about that. And I think that's what you're saying is like, okay, so why? Why is that the conclusion?
Right.
Why is that her objective?
Yeah,
and those movies are stylized enough.
Right.
To this is probably that why it's kind of not clear either. It's more about the awesome fight scenes.
Could be part of the reason why I have a fundamental problem with Tarantino movies anyway. But
right. It's all about the style, not really about the story.
But at least with Aliens, there you understand that motivation. They set it up early that Ripley, had a daughter and she didn't see her daughter grow up. And there's that scene where she's looking at the picture of her grown daughter, right? If I remember right.
Yeah, and she's basically tripping out. She's almost mourning it.
Right,
because her daughter is dead because she's like, yeah.
Doesn't her daughter look older than her in that picture, or about the same age or something like that?
Yeah,
she was in stasis
she never got
so long?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so like, there's no point for her to even try to reach out and say hi. Mm-hmm. Right. And so she's basically lost her daughter. She's lost everything. And then, so she's on this planet and she finds this stranded child who was the age her daughter was when she left into this thing. So you kind of understand why she would have this compulsion to protect this child. That's totally logical. You understand the fierceness. There's everything there to get it. And so, and she's the only person that even wants to stay and take care of Newt too. Like the rest of the crew, and they're not even all men. There's one other woman on the crew. So it's not just that it's and we talk about her in another trope. In the next one, yeah. But the woman is like the other woman on that crew is basically one of the guys, which we'll talk about next time. So she's the only woman to actually have the maternal instincts to so there's all that too. Right. Yeah, and it's so in a way, if you take so why doesn't one of the guys like have any care for like all the rest of the crew is basically just like, hey, just let the Michael Bihn's character does. Well, sort of, but they're all ready to just leave when Newt even though it's the Aliens movie, I still want to call him Reese. Oh my god. Nice. And I can't remember his name from the Aliens movie. I mean, he's so identified with the Terminator. But what the my god, it's so true. I don't remember his name either. Oh my god, I'm so bad. Everyone is now yelling at their phones. Right, of course, yeah. What the at us. What the fuck was his name in Aliens? But do you see what I mean? Like when Newt does fall down through the cracks, and they're like, well, she's lost. Let's just go. Let's just fucking go. Ripley's the only one who's like, no, we have to go get her. And they're like, no, we can't go fucking get her. She's gone. And Ripley's the only one that will, risk her life and everything to go be the mama bear, the mech suit mama bear. But do you know what I mean? Right. And why is she the only one? Because she's the only woman. True. Because the other woman isn't really a woman, and we'll talk about that next time. Hicks, Corporal Hicks. Hicks, thank you. Yes, Corporal Hicks. God damn it. Right, but no, he's
It's a way of domesticating the female character, is all I'm saying.
Right. But the thing is, though, is that, at the end of Aliens, Hicks is the only one, capable of getting whoever's the other survivors are, which is basically the robot and one other person up to the ship. Somebody needs to be at the ship. So you send Hicks, who's wounded. Yeah. Right. I mean, so he could not have. I mean, I think if Hicks hadn't been wounded, he might have helped her. But then, of course, you didn't. If that happened, you wouldn't have set up the one-on-one between Ripley and the mama alien.
Which is cool. It's the queen insect versus the strong female. Lady. Like I get it. Yeah. Which is cool too. It's not like there's like everything is wrong with that either. It's just like there's this trope that pops up again. She has to be domestic. But like you said, once she moves on to her next story, then it changes, and that's a different story.
Because that's the thing about the Alien franchise, really, is that until you
there is a next story.
There is a next story. There is a continuation. It's not a complete story. Whereas when you get to the end of the trilogy for the Hunger Games, that's a complete story.
That is her conclusion. Yeah.
Right.
Same thing with Kill Bill. That is her conclusion.
And anytime, and yeah, right. But whereas with Aliens, you put they literally put the characters in stasis, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, exactly.
For the trip home, and so that implies that the story is incomplete, and so kind of even though Ripley is within the microcosm of the Aliens movie.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
A mother knows best within the greater context of her story. She's not. She's and this is something you point out in the essay when you say that the character of Ripley was originally supposed to be a man.
Yep.
Is that her whole arc, even after?
Well, originally, and I don't know. I don't know if that was. I know that was true for the first script for Alien.
Right, but for Aliens, Alien 3, Alien Covenant, they were having to deal with
Sigourney Weaver at that point.
It's Sigourney Weaver. That Ripley is, and Sigourney Weaver is a fucking badass.
I fucking love her.
Yeah.
She's my doppelganger. She's my celebrity doppelganger. I look just like her. At least I hope I look like her when I'm that age. God, she's fucking hot.
We're both October 8th birthdays.
Oh, are you?
Mm-hmm.
What is she, like 10 years older than us?
No, like 20 years older than me.
Oh, is she? Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah. She's like, well, let's take a look.
So she's like my mom's age.
Let's see here. Oh, and she's an Amazon. She's 6 foot tall.
Oh, is she?
Yeah, that's what it says here.
Goodness.
Yeah, she is.
Well, I'm 5'9", so.
She is in my mom's generation. She was October 8th, 1949. She is.
Oh, okay. So
she's about 70 years old.
Wow.
Yeah. And she
Here's
still
to older
looks,
women. Cheers.
Exactly. Well, of course, older women that have makeup artists and personal trainers. And,
oh, yeah. Well, older celebrities is a whole different monster than older actual humans.
But yeah. No, Sigourney Weaver's awesome. And there was another article I read a while back. So even though this is a particular trope, that character Ripley is kind of the template for all female badasses.
For all female badasses?
All female badasses, yeah.
Even though she only started in the 70s?
Well, you could probably say that as far as American movies go, she is the template for the postmodern female badass.
Just sci-fi or?
For everything.
Oh.
And I wish I should find that article and send that to you.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
I should have done that. But anyway, yes. So prior to, if you had not had Ripley starting in the 70s with that badass character, you would not have had Sarah Connor.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's T2. True. Yeah. Yeah.
You would not have had all these other. You would not have had.
Well, even Sarah Connor started out as a sort of damsel in distress or like a horror movie chick. Mm-hmm.
But and Sarah Connor even came along after the first Alien movie, but before the Aliens movie. Right. But no, if you your Resident Evil movies.
Yeah.
Your even our
even to have a female as the center of an action
Right. Was not. I mean, yes, you had things like the blaxploitation movie with Jackie. Who was that actress that did Jackie Brown with the Tarantino movie? What was her name? Pam Grier. You had Pam Grier in the 70s with kind of the crime. You know, that's how she got roped into being the Jackie Brown character, was because of stuff she did in blaxploitation films.
Right.
If I remember right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I might be fucking up my total film history right there.
I don't know. I don't know much about
Pam Grier. Make sure I'm not misremembering my film history here. Oh, yeah, right. Starring in a string of 1970s women in prison and blaxploitation films such as The Big Birdcage, Coffee, Foxy Brown, and Sheba Baby. Right, so she did a... Oh, yeah, man.
Sheba Baby.
And then she did Jackie Brown, of course. She did Beyond the Valley of the Dolls. She was in The Big Dollhouse, Women in Cages, The Twilight People, Cool Breeze, The Big Birdcage, Hitman, Black Mama, White Mama. Scream. Wow. She was in Scream, Blackula, Scream. Oh,
Scream, Blackula, Scream.
Right. Foxy
Holy
Brown,
shit.
Sheba Baby, Bucktown, Friday Foster, Greased Lightning. Ooh, she was in Fort Apache, the Bronx.
This is all like, this is all blaxploitation?
Yeah, well, I mean, Fort Apache, the Bronx was more mainstream, but like, you know, Foxy Brown, Sheba Baby, and of course, Scream, Blackula, Scream was all. That
means super hypersexualized too in that case.
Blaxploitation. And so, you know, I mean, that's one of the things that you should probably, when you expand these into books, is take a look at the female badasses in B movies and blaxploitation and see how those differ or challenge or complement these tropes.
Right. Yeah.
Because that's
probably a whole nother series of tropes there. Because I didn't really address women of color or trans women just because I don't really feel like I have the stance to do so. I think there are other voices that would do that with more accuracy and more.
But that does not mean you should not try.
Well, maybe so.
Otherwise, you're being too white.
Oh, really? If I stick with okay.
Yeah, you should at least make an attempt to understand and address.
I mean, I don't want to. Yeah, no, definitely that. I just don't. I don't want to like try and adopt a voice of someone that I don't really.
Well, yeah. I mean, you might not want to go so far as to define a specific, blaxploitation trope that you would have to have had a black experience to fully understand.
Right, exactly.
But as a critic and a writer and someone who can synthesize and have empathy and
an analyzer of literature
and I'm sure has, friends who are POCs, that is people of color, you could always ask and get inputs and critique and review to make sure that you're not operating from a place of privileged white ignorance.
Right. Well, yeah, that's true.
It all just
and a lot of these 7 tropes do cover like lots of ground.
Right.
That's not
right.
They don't just cover white women like characters either.
But yeah, Foxy Brown seeks revenge when her government agent boyfriend is shot down by members of a drug syndicate at her doorstep.
Oh, damn.
She links her boyfriend's murderers to a modeling agency run by Steve Elias and Miss Catherine that services local judges, congressmen, and police in the area. Foxy decides to pose as a prostitute to infiltrate the company and help save a fellow black woman from a life of drugs and sexual exploitation and reunites her with her husband and child. So Foxy Brown, it seems like from this story, is a female badass who at the end does not wander off into domestication.
No, she helps another to their happy ending.
Right. So this So what we're looking at here is that we have to. So you have these tropes, particularly with Mother Knows Best, is you have this tendency with Mother Knows Best that seems to almost be a white lady trope.
Maybe so.
And when you get into, so if you were to mix it up with things like Foxy Brown or badass lady tropes from blaxploitation, you might end up having to kind of rejigger and tweak this one.
That's interesting. Okay.
Because, it's kind of like last week where you're trying to, we were talking about how sometimes these tropes, when you place them against the broader arc of society, you begin to see a different pattern, why they emphasize this trope after a certain period. And so what you have here as well.
And what do these tropes do to influence culture or vice versa?
Right. Because this trope, this Mother Knows Best thing, so far with Beatrix Kiddo, with Katniss Everdeen, and with even Sigourney Weaver, with Ripley, these are all white ladies becoming badasses to protect children. So what does that say when it's contrasted and compared with, something like a Foxy Brown who becomes a badass but is not domesticated? Is that because black women have that choice, or because black women don't have that choice?
I could start talking about something about the hypersexualization of black women through cinema history.
Exactly.
There is that the wildness and the exotification of black women, the
primitivization of blackness in American culture, the violent, aggressive, stereotypical, and then also, of course, you have to get in with socioeconomic deprivation and racism and all that stuff that plays into it. Why, when you take just the framework of the existing trope that you've identified, does Foxy Brown seem to throw it over? And what about a character like Foxy Brown would, or even later, because Pam Grier goes on to do Jackie Brown.
Right, exactly, yeah.
And that's a Tarantino movie, which I never saw, which I might be interested in seeing now that we've had this discussion.
That's, okay. Well, that's interesting. Okay. See, you're giving me all kinds of good fertilization for when I expand these.
Yeah. So So it's just kind of, that being said, I think all of these tropes, you've identified some solid tropes here, some solid, shorthands, shortcuts, things that writers are using.
It's a lazy writing type thing.
Right.
Yeah. And that's really what tropes are. They're stereotypes and they're lazy writing.
Mm-hmm. And apparently by the size of the TV tropes database, there's a fuck ton of lazy writing out there.
Well, it's true, but also like what you were saying about the TV trope site is that some of them aren't really tropes. Some of them are just like, hey, that's a stereotype I noticed.
Yeah, that's a thing that annoys me. Right.
And trope is something that's repeated and is like insidious and is like everywhere.
Right. And that it makes certain assumptions about humans and society and motivation that not incorrect, but oversimplified.
Right. Which is what a stereotype is.
Correct. They have some truth to them, but have been reduced to a meaninglessness by lack of thought or analysis.
There you go.
Right on.
Excellently said.
I always get wiser the deeper into the bottle of wine I get, right?
Right. Oh, man.
Of course, I'm probably slurring my words and think I sound great. I'll hear from Heather or the audience. Like, no, around about, minute 40, you just fuck off into the universe and just, there you go.
Dude. We're both gonna listen to all of these and be like, God damn, we are fucking hammered. What is going on? But this is just more about like, we're allowing our listeners to experience the amazing thing that it is to sit with Jason Malott and Jenn Zuko as they talk about literature, culture, and philosophy and get
their drink
Although,
on.
We don't get wasted drink
No,
everyone
because
else under the table that
Right.
ever tries to do it with us.
yeah, that should be part of the intro. Is that sit down when the podcast starts and start drinking a bottle of wine, and realize that whenever it is that you stop drinking,
They're still
they're
going.
still going. And if you stop at
They
30
almost-
minutes or
they
45 minutes, they're still going. They're going to sign off like we're going to sign off here in a few seconds. And they keep going for at least another
Jason
hour.
and Jen almost killed a fellow graduate student of theirs in the literature in the creative writing
did
program
not
at
almost
Europa.
kill
We
him.
almost killed him.
No,
He
we
almost
didn't.
died.
No, he didn't.
It sure seemed like he almost died.
He was just a little sick.
He was pale as death.
He was a little
poor
too
thing.
sweaty to be death.
Nobody.
Okay,
In other
so
words, don't try and keep up with us.
right. Don't keep up with us. So next week will be the one of the guys trope.
Yes, that is
Now,
the story of my life.
Did you ever see that movie, One of the Guys?
I did not. Is that's the one that it was based on Twelfth Night, right? Isn't that based on Shakespeare's Twelfth Night?
I don't
Am I wrong
think
about that?
so.
Am I thinking about something else?
Well, 10 Things I Hate About You was based on Taming of the Shrew.
I know, but I know there was one that was based on Twelfth Night.
Let me double check.
I thought it was one of the guys, but
One of the Guys, which I loved that movie because Joyce Heisner at the time I thought was fucking hot.
oh,
She probably still is, but she's like way older than me.
oh,
Yeah, it's the one with the movie poster where you got all the football players in towels
and
facing
she's
their
got
lockers.
footballs over.
She's got the
helmets
helmets over her boobs. Yeah,
I
yeah.
think that's based on Twelfth Night. I think that I remember that correctly. I never saw it, but I remember the poster very clearly. I think it's based on Twelfth Night, loosely.
Well, IMDb is not ever very helpful, so let me check Wikipedia.
No, not unless you want to know something about actor births and deaths and things.
Well, IMDb kind of
Cast lists and stuff.
Well, yeah, cast list, and then they don't have anyone. Ah, there we go. Yeah, 12th Night. You're right.
Ah, cool.
That was quick. Just a matter of getting to the right page on Wikipedia.
That's right.
But
The World Wide Web of information at our
no
fingertips.
shit. No shit. So next week, one of the guys, another bottle of wine. We're
Yeah.
almost done with these tropes.
Aw.
Oh.
I'm writing the next series, but
I know.
they won't be done for another few months.
That's fine. We have plenty of time. And plus, I have to
Okay.
get back on my running schedule when we're done here.
Oh, okay. Right.
Right. So say goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
The Outrider Podcast is recorded by me, Jason Quinn Malott, and cleaned up by my badass producer, Heather Ann Eden. The songs Choose and Adventure and Break and Mend used in this series are by Wichita-based band Cartwheel off their new EP, Best Days, and are used by permission of the copyright holder, Kristen Chapman. You can get Cartwheel's EP on Apple Music and Spotify, so visit them at www.cartwheel.band.